Hey guys, this is going to be our last week looking at the life of Joseph. We are going to be in chapter 50 of Genesis, and this is the conclusion of the story. If you've been following along, we've been going through all the things that have happened in Joseph's life, and now we get to the end of the book, and we get to see how his story ends. Our first point comes from verses 15 through 18. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." Our first point is that God's grace doesn't change. We see here that Joseph's brothers kind of come up with this plot to get Joseph to be faithful to them, right? They think that, Joseph will remember so long ago that we sold him into slavery, that we betrayed him, that we made up this lie, that we basically tried to get him out of the family and just ruin his life. And will now he finally repay us for all the evil that we've done to him, for all the sin that we've done. He's been faithful to us, he's brought us in, but now that our father Jacob's dead, will he finally pay us back, right? This is kind of a normal doubt. It kind of makes sense. And oftentimes we operate like this too before God. We think, man, will there finally be a day where God looks at me and doesn't show me grace? Will there finally be a day where he says, "You know what, I'm done with you. You've messed up so much that now I can't be with you." And so this is kind of a normal doubt, but as we'll see, God's grace doesn't change. He's been faithful to Joseph all this time and faithful to Joseph's family, right? He's brought them in to provide for them in Egypt. And so we see that this doubt is, it's normal, but it's not really based on anything. Our second point comes from verses 19 through 21. But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This is the final climax of the life of Joseph and his story. We see that now he gets to remind his brothers again, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. This whole story, everything that's happened for me, you meant it for evil, right? You meant to sell me out. You were doing this on a bad intention, right? You meant evil for me, and yet God has brought about so much good from it, right? We see that Joseph does not put himself in the place of God. He says, it's not my place to judge you. It's not my place to bring down condemnation on you. I'm not in the place of God. Joseph has learned this lesson over and over from God providing for him, God showing up in his life, being faithful to him. And now Joseph has the ability to say, you know what? God has meant all this for good. And we see that Jesus is the ultimate and better Joseph, and this is the final culmination of that, right? What the world means for evil, God meant for good. We see Jesus on the cross. This is a terrible evil. How in the world can this be made right? But we see that God is working behind the scenes, right? He meant that for so much good, not only to save Egypt and the people who came there for food, but to save the entire world. And that is the whole story of Joseph. The whole story of the Bible is that it points directly to Jesus. Our final point, looking at the life of Joseph, comes from verses 22 through 26. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. We see that Joseph acts largely like his father Jacob. When Jacob dies, he says to his sons, "Take my bones up, we're going to a different land. God has made this promise to us." And Joseph says the same thing, right? He makes his brothers and all of his relatives, everyone who has lived after him, remember that God will visit you. God will fulfill his promise. As he's done to me, he will do to all of us we're not meant for this land, right? And we see that this promise is fulfilled when the Israelites leave Egypt, right? They're actually brought out of their slavery by God, by all these miracles. God works in such an incredible way to actually fulfill his promise to them, to bring them up out of this land. And then we see thousands of years later that God actually visits his people in the human form of Jesus, that God actually takes on our likeness to come and dwell among us. So we, reading this passage today, can also claim this promise that Joseph meant for the people around him. We can claim it even more so because we live in the light of the life of Jesus, right? We can look to Jesus and say that God has surely visited us. He's visited our world. He's come to save it, right? Though there's so much evil in the world, God sent Jesus to redeem it, to bring many people to life. And that is the whole point of the story of Joseph, is that it points directly to Jesus and the work that he does in our lives today.